The rainy season is a time of year that can be both rewarding and challenging. The rains bring with them the possibility of landslides and flooding, which can damage your crops. However, with a bit of preparation, you can make sure that your crops are healthy and thrive during the rainy season. In this post, we are going to provide you with tips on how to plant your crops during the rainy season and ensure that you have a successful harvest. From choosing the right crops to planting them in the right way, we will cover everything you need to know in order to have a successful rainy season. So if you are looking to increase your agricultural output or simply want to learn more about the rainy season, read on. 1. Tips for planting during the rainy season. The rainy season is a great time to plant crops because the ground is softer and moister. If you're planting food crops, such as tomatoes or potatoes, the ground should be well tilled and the seeds should be well stratified, which is putting the right type and number of seeds in the right place at the right time. Some crops, such as onions and garlic, can be planted at any time of the year, but they will have a better yield and quality if they're planted in the fall. When planting crops, be sure to water them regularly and keep the soil evenly moist. Don't water them so much that the soil becomes saturated and waterlogged, which can damage the roots. There are also a few things you can do to help you get your crops off to a good start. Cover the seed with about ½ inch of soil and then tamp it down. Water the soil and the seed well, and then cover the seed with more soil. Another thing you can do is to cover the seed with a thin layer of organic matter, such as compost or leaves. This will help the seed to germinate more easily and improve the soil's fertility. When planting, be sure to give your plants plenty of sunlight and water and be patient. It can take up to 6 months for crops to mature. 2. How to water your crops properly. When it comes to growing crops, it's essential to water them properly in order to ensure a successful harvest. If you're not watering your plants correctly, you're likely not getting the nutrients they need to grow and produce fruit or vegetables. There are a few things you can do to make sure you're watering your crops correctly. 1. Use a rain gauge to measure the amount of rainfall your area has received. This will help you determine how much water to give your plants. 2. Check the soil moisture level. If the soil is dry, water the plants. If the soil is moist, wait until the soil dries out before watering the plants. 3. Water the plants at the base of the leaves first. This will help the water reach the root system. 4. Make sure the water waste is drained properly. If the water is left standing on the ground for too long, it will become contaminated with bacteria that can kill your plants. 5. Use an irrigation system that is specifically designed for crops. This will help to distribute the water more evenly and prevent damage to the plants. 6. Check the plants regularly for signs of wilting or leaf yellowing. If the plants are not receiving the water they need, they will start to wilt, and the leaves will turn yellow. 7. If you notice any of these signs, water the plants immediately. 3. How to protect your crops from pests. The rainy season is a time when pests are more active and you need to take measures to protect your crops. Here are a few tips to help you succeed. 1. Use organic or natural pesticides. These pesticides will not harm you or the environment, and they are effective against pests. 2. Plant your crops in areas that are sheltered. This will help protect them from the rain and the pests. 3. Plant your crops in areas that are well drained. This will help prevent flooding and waterlogging. 4. Plant your crops in areas that are well aerated. This will help prevent fungus and pests from building up. 5. Plant your crops in areas that are well irrigated. This will help prevent your crops from becoming thirsty and unhealthy. 6. Plant your crops in areas that are well fertilized. This will help your crops grow and produce food. 4. Tips for harvesting your crops. The rainy season is a great time to plant crops as the ground is fertile and water is available in abundance. However, before you plant, it is important to know the different stages of growth your crops will go through and what to do at each stage. The first step is to determine the time of year. Rainy season crops grow best during the wet phase of the moon. This is when the ground is saturated with water and the seeds can germinate easily. It is also a good time to plant crops as the sun is not as strong and the heat will not be as intense. The second step is to determine the location of your crop. Crops that are planted in the shade will not grow as well as those that are planted in the sunlight. The third step is to determine the type of crop you are planting. Crops that require a lot of water, such as rice, need to be planted in areas that have a lot of water available. The fourth step is to determine the size of the plant you are planting. For crops that need a lot of water, such as rice, it is important to plant the seeds in a large area so the plant can grow and fill up the space. The fifth step is to determine the time you will harvest the crop. Crops that need to be harvested quickly, such as maize, should be harvested when the flowers are open. The sixth step is to determine the method you will use to harvest the crop. Harvesting crops by hand is the most traditional way, but there are also machines that can be used to harvest crops. 5. What to do with your crops once they are harvested. Harvesting crops during the rainy season can be a tricky business. This is because the weather can be unpredictable and can cause your crops to rot. However, with the right tips, you can make sure that you're successful in planting and harvesting crops during the rainy season. First and foremost, make sure that you have a good irrigation system in place. This system will help to ensure that your crops get the water that they need to grow. Secondly, make sure that you have a good drainage system in place. This system will help to prevent your crops from getting wet and rotting. Finally, make sure that you have a good storage system in place. This system will help to keep your crops fresh and free from pests. 6. What to do if your crops fail. The rainy season is a time of year when many farmers plant their crops. If you're a farmer, this is a time of year that you hope your crops will be successful. Unfortunately, sometimes crops fail. This can happen for a variety of reasons, but here are some tips to help you succeed in planting your crops during the rainy season. When you're planting your crops, make sure that you're doing it in a way that's best for your farmland. If you're planting crops in an area that's flood-prone, make sure to choose a location that's not in a flood zone. Also, make sure that you're planting your crops in the right location. Crops that are planted in the wrong location will not be successful. When you're planting your crops, make sure to have the right tools. You'll need a shovel, fork, hoe, and a water jug to help you plant your crops. 7. What to do if the rainy season is too long. If you're like most farmers, you probably dread the long, wet season. The problem is, sometimes the rainy season can be too long. The good news is that there are a few things you can do to help you succeed. First, make sure you have the right equipment. If you're not using the right tools, you'll end up wasting time and energy trying to do things that should be easy. Second, make sure you have the right seeds. The right seeds will germinate and grow in the right soil, and that's important because it will help you get the most out of your efforts. Third, make sure you're watering your plants. The wrong amount of water can damage your plants, and that will prevent them from producing the food you need. Finally, make sure you're monitoring your crops. If something looks wrong, don't hesitate to call a professional. 8. What to do if the rainy season is too short. If the rainy season is too short, you may need to plant crops that can withstand a shorter growing time. For example, you may want to plant crops such as vegetables or fruit trees that can be harvested in a shorter amount of time. You may also want to consider planting crops that can help you tide over until the next rainy season. For example, you may want to plant crops that can help you feed livestock or produce food for consumption by humans. You may also want to consider planting crops that can be sold during the dry season. For example, you may want to plant crops that can be sold as souvenirs or used as ingredients in local cuisine. 9. What to do if there is a drought. Okay, so you've been through the planting process and now it's time to take care of your crops. The rains have finally come, but what if there's a drought? There are a few things you can do to help your crops survive, but it's important to keep in mind that the weather is always changing. So, you'll have to keep adjusting your plans as necessary. If there is a drought, water your crops as much as possible. However, don't overwater them or you'll kill the plants. Try to water them at a consistent time so they don't get too dry. If you have an irrigation system, make sure to turn it on and off according to the weather so the water doesn't get wasted. Also, make sure to fertilize your crops. Fertilizers will help your plants grow and produce more crops. Fertilize them early in the morning or late at night so the nutrients are absorbed quickly. Finally, don't forget to pick your crops. If you leave them in the field too long, they will get crushed and you won't get any crops. Pick your crops regularly and you'll be on your way to a successful harvest. 10. Conclusion. It's that time of year again when you're probably wondering what to do with all of your fresh fruits and vegetables. Well, here are a few tips to help you plant your crops during the rainy season and have a successful harvest. First, it's important to know that the rainy season is the best time to plant crops because the ground is fertile and the water will help to moisten the soil. You also want to make sure to plant your crops in well-drained soil and avoid planting in areas that have been flooded in the past. You should also plan to water your crops regularly during the rainy season and wait until the first raindrop falls before doing so. Be sure to use a rain gauge to monitor the rain and adjust your irrigation accordingly. Last, be sure to fertilize your crops regularly during the rainy season and harvest your crops when they are ready. By following these tips, you'll be able to have a successful harvest, and you'll be able to enjoy your fresh fruits and vegetables all winter long. We hope you enjoyed our video on how planting your crops during the rainy season can help you succeed. This is a great time to plant your crops because the weather is cooperative and there is plenty of water available. Follow the tips in this post and you will be able to plant your crops successfully and get the most out of this season.